All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's book discussion. My name is Stephanie Melvin. I'm the Director of Alumni and Alumni Relations at Trinity Washington University. Also online with us is Alessandra Birding, who is the Associate Director of Programs and Services. Tonight's author is Elizabeth Liz Hawkins. She is the author of two books, including The World Outside Our Door. She also blogs about the long term effects of growing up with an alcoholic parent. A native Washingtonian, Liz was raised in the southeast section of Washington, D.C., and is a graduate of Ballou High School. She worked 34 years for the federal government in the human resources and equal employment opportunity fields before retiring in 2018. Liz is also a Trinity Washington University graduate, earning her Bachelor of Arts degree in Communications in 2016, and currently resides in Prince George's County, Maryland, with her husband Charles. Just want to go ahead and make a reminder to everyone: we will be recording this, so if you do have to leave us at any point, we will be sending you a link of the book discussion along with a survey that we ask that you fill out for us to help us with future programming. Once again, if you could, please type your name and class year in the chat box and any questions, and we will get to them as they come. So tonight's author, Liz Hawkins, thank you so much for joining us, Liz, to talk about your book, The World Outside Our Door. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good, good. So let's get a little bit of information about you. How did you end up attending Trinity?
Oh, well, after I graduated from high school, one of the colleges I thought I would be able to attend was Trinity. It didn't happen. I ended up going to community college. I ended up going to Strayer and getting my associate degree. But I never gave up on, you know, earning my bachelor's degree. So probably around 1992, I pursued Trinity again. This is when they had the weekend college. So I went to classes on Friday and Saturday, and I was trying to get a human relations degree. But something happened, and I don't know why I gave up on my on my degree program. I just gave it up, and I don't know why, but it never left me. So in 2007, I decided, darn it, I'm gonna earn that bachelor's. I don't care that I'm getting old. I'm just gonna do it. And so I came back and I actually finished, and I'm quite. It's one of my biggest achievements, one of my proudest moments to finally, earn that bachelor's degree.
Okay, good for you. Good for you. Any particular professors, staff members that probably, inspired you during your time at Trinity?
Well, there was a communications. I think she taught interpersonal communications. Her name was Monica Wells Couture. She passed away, unfortunately, but she actually was the one that sort of inspired me to switch my major from human relations to communications. She was a very good teacher. She brought out a lot in me, so
Okay.
kudos to her.
And how was your time at Trinity?
How was it? It was great. It was the best time. That second time, the first time was hard, but that second time, I guess I was just ready because I made like all A's and B's. I loved going to the campus. I loved everything about it, and the teachers were great.
Okay, good, good. That's always good to hear that you had a good experience at Trinity. So the book you wrote is called The World Outside Our Door. I don't know if anyone can see it because I'm moving, but here's a little bit of the cover. So tell me, Liz, what inspired you to write the book?
Well, I'm not sure if I was inspired so much as sort of challenged. My first book was about my mother. She had told me all these crazy stories about her childhood, and I'd heard these stories a million times. And I decided, I think I'm gonna capture these stories like in a book. So I picked like 20 stories, and I had like this book of little short stories from pigtails to pinafores. And when we finally got it done, we were so happy. And I said, "What do you think Daddy would have thought about this?" Because my father had been passed away for like 20 years by this time. It was like 2005 then. And she said, oh, you would have had to write a book about him too. And so I was like, I think I'm going to try that. And so I did try for many years, and it took a long time, but that was the start of it. When she sort of challenged me to, you have to write one for him too,
Oh, okay. Now, I did read the book. Obviously, if you have a book discussion, you have to read the book because you don't want to look like you don't know what the heck is going on in the storyline. I have to admit, the book was a little tough. There was some funny moments in it, but there was really a lot of emotional moments in it. Um, and it kind of reminded me a few times of, some things that happened in my family. So it's almost seems like you were writing a book for everyone. What was the process you went through to get it finished and published?
Well, because my father never really talked to me directly about his childhood, I had to rely on a lot of stories that my mother, told me about him, which he shared with her, but he didn't share with me. So I had those stories. I call them my bits and pieces of what I knew about him. And I went on the ancestry.com and scoured through the census records to learn as much as I could about him and his family members and so forth. And then I worked with a writing coach who helped me tremendously. The first part of the process, when she basically gave me like titles, they write about this, write about that, and we got through the whole book. And it was a process of just getting it all out, just whatever, it was quite pathologic as well. A lot of emotions came up out of it that I wasn't expecting. And once we got it all written out, then we went back and edited, took out this and put in that, we just really fine tuned it. So it took about 9 months, about as long as to have a baby. And it was just as painful. I imagine. I never had a baby, but I'm just
Okay.
imagining.
I was going to say probably a different type of pain.
Yeah. But that was basically the process. And I had, self-published before. So I self-published this book. And so they had their own process that they go through. So that was
Okay.
basically it.
What I noticed on your book was that you were a finalist in the American Fiction Awards. How did that feel? How did that come about for you?
I guess I was looking for validation that this is good, because I was feeling good about this book. And the finalists, the judge, they rate you from like 1 to 5, 5 being outstanding. And I got like 2 outstandings, which just stoked me. It was in structure, organization, and pacing. I got outstanding, and character appeal and development, which I loved because I really struggled with some of these characters. So I was really proud that they did what they were supposed to do. So
Mm.
yeah, I loved it. I wish I'd have won, but darn it, I'll take that finalist thing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So, if you wouldn't mind, Liz, I would love for you to read from the following pages, 51 to 53, if you could. Let's get
Okay.
the audience a little warmed up with what some of the stuff you've written.
Chapter 7. During the summer of 1973, 11-year-old Liz got into the habit of staying up late and listening to music on the stereo through the headphones her brother Rodney had left when he and John joined the Army the previous year. One night, she sat on the living room sofa in total darkness, listening to Michael Jackson's first album, Got to Be There. It was 35 minutes of pure bubblegum R&B soul. She loved each and every song on the album, and she played it over and over in its entirety. Songs like I Want to Be Where You Are and The Wings of Love caused Liz to feel trepidation. A trembling motion in her stomach occurred when she wondered if anyone would ever feel so passionately about her. She tried to imagine her future and what it would be like when or who she would marry, how many children she would have. But her daydreams were often hazy. She really couldn't imagine the man of her dreams. So instead, in her mind, she pretended that she was different. She conjured up an image of herself as the extroverted, multi-talented singer, songwriter, and dancer girlfriend of Michael Jackson, living in Encino, California. About a quarter to midnight, she was pulled out of her fantasy world when she saw a tall, thin figure enter the living room and move toward the front door. It was Fred. He didn't see her. She removed her headphones and called out to him in a loud whisper. "Hey, Daddy," she said, startling her father, who had just reached the doorknob. "Shit, you scared me," he said. Liz turned on the table light to see Fred, his eyes wide with surprise. "What are you still doing up this time of night?" "I'm listening to music." "Where are you going this time of night?" Liz smirked and peered at her father. "I'm going to the store." Fred gave Liz a challenging look, though his shoulders slouched. He knew he was busted, and he knew that Liz knew it too. Their eyes stayed locked on each other for several seconds.
Uh-oh, we might be having a bit of a technical issue. Hello, Liz, if you can hear us, it looks like you're stuck. All right, until she gets back on, I think what I can do for everybody is I think I can read a little bit of the book where she stopped. Oh, okay, she's kicked off, so I'll read a little bit of the book until we can get her back on. Their eyes stayed locked on each other for a few seconds. Liz narrowed her eyes, and then Fred finally blinked. In this moment, Liz somehow knew she had the upper hand, and it gave her a sense of power. "Well, bring me back some pixie sticks," she demanded. "They don't have that sort of thing at this store," Fred said in an exasperation, growing impatient. "Well, do they have potato chips?" Liz snapped back. She had developed a hankering for sweet and salty snacks. She unconsciously used food to soothe her innate feelings of inadequacy. Although she was currently in fantasy mode where she usually felt good about herself, she decided to seize the opportunity that had unexpectedly presented itself. "Yes, they have potato chips," Fred huffed. "What about fruit punch soda? Do they sell that?" "I think so, yes." "Okay, then bring me back some Bon Ton barbecue, potato chips, and a bottle of Tahitian treat fruit punch soda," Liz said. Fred rolled his eyes and left for the liquor store. Liquor was not sold on Sunday, but Fred knew of a few liquor stores in Maryland that began selling hard liquor at the stroke of midnight. Liz had busted her father sneaking out of the house that night to buy booze. For her silence, he would have to pay the price. And so each time after this night that he attempted to sneak out to make a Sunday at midnight liquor run, Liz would waylay Fred and demand that he bring her something as well. One night, Fred thought he'd gotten past his daughter's toll tax. She had been in her bedroom and not the living room. He had made it out of the yard and to his car and had thought he was home free. Lifting her bedroom window, which faced the front of the house, Liz staged whisper, "Don't forget the potato chips and fruit punch soda." All right, do we have Liz back? Okay. All right, I'm sorry, folks, as usual. Okay, is she back now? Okay. All right, folks, hopefully we can get Liz back into the room.
Hello?
Hey, Liz, okay.
Yeah, I had a power something and it just knocked me right off.
Oh, okay. Well, I finished reading that chapter for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. As we were discussing earlier before everyone came on board, technology is great until it's not.
It's just anything can happen Tuesday.
That's right. Okay, so I finished that chapter for you. So my next question is, you have so many details in this book from different decades, locations, and incidents. it adds richness to the story. Was that the intent?
Yeah, it was. I think when I first attempted this, I was going to try to get his whole, I wanted to get his whole life story in, his whole 70 years in. And I was trying to start like from his birth on up. And when I was consulted with my writing coach, she said, well, you really can't do it like that because it would be like the saga of Roots. We'd still be writing now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the intent was to capture as much of his life as possible. And we did a lot of flashbacks and memories and that kind of thing. So, yeah, it was definitely intentional.
Well, that's true because you don't approach it from the standard, he was born on this day and da 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 da, and here it is, present day. So you kind of go in and out with obviously, various and different people. This book speaks about shame and denial in a family. In other words, trauma, as we know it today. We put a word to it, and it's called trauma. How has trauma affected you and your family?
Well, honestly, I didn't know the trauma affected me until I started writing this book. It wasn't until the writing coach asked me, so how did your father's drinking affect you? I'm in total denial or just total ignorance. It didn't affect me at all, so I thought. She directed me to a website called Children of Alcoholics. And there's a whole laundry list of characteristics that growing up in an alcoholic family or household, how it how it affects different members of the family. Um, for me, I was very hypersensitive to everything because you didn't know what you were going to get sometime. My father might be angry, he might be short, he might be jovial. You didn't know what you were going to get, so you're always on a heightened awareness. Um, I also found myself sort of the parent in the family to both my parents because my mother was a child of an alcoholic as well. So yeah, it was a lot of. I think I carry a lot of my stress, anxiety, feelings, all that stuff. I think I draw it in, and I just didn't really know. I think I just thought I was coping. I thought I was doing all right because I wasn't a drinker or a smoker. So surely I had to be better than my father. But I developed other addictions, such as food addictions, stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely been a learning curve for me writing this book. And I didn't even know I was dealing with trauma and repeating like patterns, generational patterns.
Okay, so we're going to try this again. So, can you read pages 83 to 85 for us?
Okay, chapter 12, Southeast Washington, D.C., 1976. In the summer of 1976, when Liz was 14, the first boy she really liked was her neighbor named CJ. He was a brawny teenager, raging with a bit of scruff and buff and a whole lot of sexy. He was a rugged boy, the kind you'd want to be alone with in the wilderness for more than one reason. Aside from good looks, CJ was smart, and that was a characteristic even her father had to admire. Fred had run all the neighborhood boys away who showed any interest in his daughter. He was intimidating, and most of the boys the house when Mr. Smith came outside, all except CJ. CJ came by the house on his bike and stopped to talk to Liz, who was usually sitting on the front porch. Fred's intimidating looks and gruff speech didn't faze CJ in the least, but CJ was always respectful. One evening, Fred decided to invite him to sit on the porch with him and Liz, since it was apparent CJ was determined to converse with Liz, even if it meant from outside the front gate. This particular evening, Fred decided to get into the conversation by engaging Liz and CJ in the game of naming U.S. capitals. It became apparent early in the game that Fred had met his match. What's the capital of Vermont? Fred asked. Montpelier, CJ replied with confidence. Okay, what about North Carolina? I'm sorry, North Dakota, Fred asked, trying to stump CJ with one he thought was hard. Bismarck, CJ answered. Liz didn't even know the state capitals, some that CJ recalled so easily. This made Liz like him even more. He actually impressed her father. One day, Liz was locked out of the house. She had been visiting with a neighbor across the street. When she returned home, she noticed her father's car was gone. He didn't know she didn't have her key with her. Another liquor store run, Liz figured. But after waiting for an hour on the front porch, Liz was ready to go inside. She went to the back door to check to see if the storm door was unlocked. When she pulled on the door latch, she was pleasantly surprised that the door opened. She knew that a spare key hung on a nail at the top of the door frame. The door contained 6 individual window panes. Liz figured if she broke the upper left hand pane, she could reach the key that hung at the top of the inside door frame. She looked around the backyard for something to use to break the window pane. Their yard used to be filled with gravel rocks, which served as a rugged surface for a driveway. But her mother wanted green grass and flowers, so they gave the gravel rocks to Mona's parents for their driveway. Liz recalled the day Mona's brothers had come to the house and filled 2 radio flyer wagons with the rocks, making several trips until all the rocks had been removed. Liz finally found a smooth, round rock which she thought was dense enough to crack the window pane. Back at the rear door, Liz tapped the window pane until it split horizontally. She was able to push the bottom half inside. After she heard the glass hit the kitchen floor and break, something told her to do the same to the top half of the pane. However, she ignored her intuition. Liz put on put Liz put her long, thin arm through the opening and felt along the door frame for the spare key. When she couldn't locate it, she pulled her arm back, scraping her bicep on the top half of the glass pane. Shit, she cried aloud as she noticed the blood rising from a thin layer of skin that had been sliced from the broken pane. She placed her other hand over the scrape and began to walk toward the front of the house. She didn't have a clue about what she would do next. Then she saw him. It was CJ riding down the sidewalk on his bike. Hey, CJ said, stopping at her fence, wearing a broad smile on his face. Liz approached the fence holding her arm with a terrified look in her eyes. CJ's countenance changed to concern. What's the matter? I cut my arm trying to break into the house. Let me see. Liz held her arm over the fence and lifted her hand just enough for CJ to see the cut. Hold on, I'll be right back, he said, spinning his bike around in the opposite direction. He sped off and went back to his house, which was about 6 doors down. When he returned, he had first aid antiseptic cream, alcohol pads, cotton balls, sterile gauze, and adhesive tape. Liz looked on with admiration as CJ intently focused on taking care of her wound. He really cares about me, she thought. Liz sat on the porch for another 45 minutes waiting for Fred to come home and open the door, but now she had CJ with her to keep her company.
Okay. Um, so tell us about how your family feels about you writing this book.
Well, before I published it, I read the whole book to my mother in its entirety, and she thought it was great. The only other person that really read the book in its entirety was my brother Rodney, and he gave me the greatest compliment. He said, "Alex Haley ain't got nothing on you." I'm like, "Yes, thank you." Um, some cousins have read it, and they thought it was great. But these aren't cousins that are related by they're my mother's side of the family, so they thought it was great. My nieces and nephews, a lot of them have the book. you know how people with books, sometimes they read them, sometimes they don't. One niece got through half of it and she was saying, yeah, this is great. I'm very interested in this. The thing is, I wanted to have something for the next generation to know this person, my father. He had only two granddaughters, really, three granddaughters at the time of his death, and only one kind of knew him. She was like 5 when he died. So um, I think time will tell what the family thinks, but um, I think the main people whose approval I needed was my brother and my mother.
Okay. Do
I
you
got
think
that.
do you think with some of the family members though, they haven't read it yet, is because they really don't want to perhaps open that box of memories?
No, I don't think so because they don't have those memories to open.
Okay.
Um, with my one niece, I had two brothers. One brother passed away, and the daughter of the one who passed away. The book is dedicated. The first line dedication says, "In memory of my brother John." You know, so she's broken up right from that part. So it'll be a while before she really gets into it. I think that's what's keeping her. But I just think folks in their busy lives they don't have time for reading. So that's why I got it on Audible. So now I have an excuse. You can listen to it now.
That's right. You drive and listen to a book now. Fred Smith is definitely the central figure in the book, but he clearly is a fragile and pained man. Was he ever able to move on from that before his life ended?
I would say no. Um, he was stuck in his ways. He was an alcoholic. I never really called him that. I always said he drank too much, like that was different. But no, up until really his last days, he always wanted to drink, and he always had found someone to bring him a bottle. If it was John Jr. or my sister-in-law, somebody would feel sorry for him and bring him one. So he never. No, I don't think he moved on from anything. I'm not even sure he understood the the effects that his upbringing had on him. So he just sort of stayed in that pattern his whole life. And if he had pain, he dulled it with the alcohol.
Yeah, I have to admit, some of the times when he was trying to get alcohol, how he got people to get it to him.
There was always someone.
Yeah, definitely. Like a lot of people definitely were, and
I
maybe.
have to admit, I have taken him to the liquor store too. I,
Mhm,
I helped enable him as well.
mhm.
My rationale was I don't want you out here driving, you know, so I'll just take you.
Okay, all right. Obviously, in the book, when you read the book, you've got pictures in the book of family members. Was that to give context to the story for the readers?
Well, first of all, the publisher allowed you 10 pictures free, so I was definitely going to take advantage of that, much as I was paying for it. And I thought it was nice, like I said, for the future generation to see who these people were, what they really looked like. I had the family in mind when I put those pictures in, Fred and his grandparents and his father and mother and those people
Mhm.
that I had pictures of. So I had the family in mind. And sometimes when you're reading a story, sometimes you'll give a person an image in your mind, and sometimes it's good just to see the real person. So
Yeah, that's true.
yeah.
All right, would you do me a favor and read the next pages, 113 through 115?
Chapter 16, Oxon Hill, Maryland, 1982. Fred's swivel rocker coddled his 5'11" frame, which only carried 130 pounds. Let's call this chair Command Central because Fred ruled the roost from this seat, and everybody knew that nobody sat in this chair but Fred. Its soft apricot color belied the lion of a man that once had been her daddy. He now sat on a donut cushion that helped alleviate the pain in his coccyx area. Frail from the effects of emphysema, Fred had long given up cigarettes, but his desire for the drink had never left him. His apricot chair wrapped him in comfort and soothed him as he rocked occasionally while watching the evening news on television. It also partnered with him to harbor stashed bottles of booze, contraband, whose very existence excited Fred so much that he'd lose his breath momentarily at the thought of it. Fred leaned over to the right side of the chair, straining to feel for the bottle of gin underneath. The tips of his fingers glided across the floor from back to front, but no liquor bottle was found. The exertion winded him, and he sat straight in his chair as oxygen flowed in his nostrils from his cylinder oxygen tank. He opened his mouth to get air in his lungs faster. I just need a little taste, he thought. As his breathing returned to some degree of normalcy, Fred leaned to the left to see if the gin bottle was under the other side of the chair. He ran his left hand down the side of the chair and deliberately, slowly until the tips of his fingers touched down on the floor. He held onto the chair with the right hand to steady himself. He reached further under the chair, but the extended position caused the nasal tube to disconnect. Shit, Fred said in a whispered voice. He was panting from the exhaustion and frustrated the time and energy that he had to expend on this one task. His wife Elsie was in the bedroom with their granddaughter Yvonne. He dared not ask her to help him find the liquor bottle. I want a drink, not a lecture, he thought. Fred reconnected the nasal tube to the cannula, which was the device used to deliver the airflow. The feel of the oxygen flowing in his nostrils comforted him. He relied on it. He believed that it was literally his lifeline. After a few minutes, he went back to the task of locating the liquor bottle. This time he leaned forward, reaching between his legs. Finally, he felt the tip of the bottle. Grasping the arm of the chair with his left hand, Fred leaned forward just a bit further until he could grab the bottle. He grunted at the extra effort, but he was successful. Too tired to go to the kitchen for a glass of ice, Fred rang his brass bell for help. Yvonne ran into the living room, looking eager to grant her grandpa's request. Did you ring the bell, Papa? Yes, dear. Will you bring Papa a piece of ice? Fred asked the 4-year-old Yvonne. Yvonne was quite an astute child, but was also very literal. She ran into the kitchen and pulled a step stool up to the refrigerator in order to reach the freezer. She plucked one ice cube out of the tray, following her papa's instructions to the letter, and returned to the living room. Here you go, Papa, Yvonne said proudly, popping the single ice cube into Fred's hand. She then promptly skipped back to the bedroom where she resumed playing with her doll. I did tell her to bring me a piece of ice, Fred thought. He laughed, and his laughter soon turned into a combination of laughing and coughing. Yvonne reminded Fred so much of Liz when she was a little girl. He loved Yvonne's innocence and youthful exuberance. He loved how animated she could be while telling a story and her peppiness when fulfilling a task. Fred could tell by Yvonne's eyes that she truly believed she had accomplished something great when she retrieved the ice cube for him. He loved Yvonne as much as he loved his own daughter. And to Fred, and to Fred, just like Liz, Yvonne could do no wrong. He was holding the melted ice cube when Liz returned home from her afternoon class at Strayer College. Hey, what's up? Liz said when she entered the apartment. When Fred saw Liz, his eyes lit up. Hey, Babby, will you bring me a glass? Fred asked Liz, still chuckling about Yvonne. Liz dropped her book bag on the sofa and headed into the kitchen. When she returned, she handed him an 8-ounce size glass. So what's funny? Liz asked Fred. I made the mistake of asking Yvonne to bring me a piece of ice, Fred said, plopping the single cube in the glass. Liz picked up her book bag and shot Fred a knowing look. Yeah, well, she gave you what she asked for, Liz said in a sarcastic tone. In that moment, Liz realized why Fred wanted the glass. He probably has a stash on him, Liz thought disapprovingly.
Okay. I have to admit, reading the story of Fred Smith was quite interesting, at least from my perspective, because it seemed that he was a determined man. He was always working, and he seemed to be um, getting ahead in life, despite the tragedy of his first marriage and so forth. And then getting into the military at such a later age in life, I think
Yeah.
29 years old when he
Yeah.
joined, because he knew it was going to be a consistent um, job. Was that something that he instilled in you guys?
Well, yeah, I would say. I remember he would always want us to do better, I guess. And he used to always make a comment with about to the boys about don't be the garbage man. It's like be something. He wanted them to be something even more than him, obviously. But yeah, I think he found a home in the military. It was stability, and given the time, the era that he was living in during the Depression era, um, it was just a good choice for him because he kept re-enlisting. He'd come out, re-enlist, come out, re-enlist, and then finally he joined the Air Force and stayed like 20 more years.
But I thought what was interesting, though, I think he was like a functional alcoholic.
Yes, he was. He definitely was.
I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh about that because
It's,
it's not really funny, but it was just like you're reading about him in between all of this, and like he's still drinking. He
never,
continued to
never
drink and
stopped,
yet
never stopped drinking.
going to a job
Hmm.
and all. And it just seemed like nobody except for the family knew kind of like what was going on.
Yeah, I think he got suspended one time from his job because I think he was caught sleeping on the job, so he probably was drunk. But for the most part, yeah, he functioned very well at his job. He didn't really have a job that you know was like a firefighter or anything like that. I mean, he didn't have to save lives or anything. He was
Right.
able to function at his job.
Okay.
Yep.
So the women in the book are very strong, who seem to choose men that aren't too good. Why do you think that happened?
I struggle with the idea that the women are strong. I think the women, like like me, you go to what you're familiar with. So if your father was an alcoholic, you might marry an alcoholic too. You might marry somebody who might be weak. And it's not that you're so strong. It's just that you have these traits when you're in this dysfunctional type of family that you develop. And one of the things, like for me, was like control. You know, I have to be in control. And a lot of these women in this book probably had to have some sense of control. So if you got a strong man, you probably can't exercise that control that you want. So out of being um, a child of an alcoholic, adult child of an alcoholic, and learning about this syndrome, I find that I have some of the characteristics: low self-esteem, isolation. It's a whole laundry list of things. So the women may appear strong, but they just may have ended up with people that they knew they could sort of function with. That's what I think.
Okay, so they were kind of like not so much strong, but they were kind of like being two people at once,
Yeah,
basically holding
yeah.
everything together.
Holding everything down, and that's the sort of their thing. Um, you ever seen people who just I've got to, it's not going to get done right unless I do it type of attitude. So
Absolutely.
they need a partner that's going to allow that.
Mhm. Okay. So explain what inspired the title.
Oh, the world outside our door. I'm not sure if I dreamt that or not, but when I think about this whole situation, my family, for instance, you heard what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I think they stole that from us because what my father and mother used to say, what happens in this house stays in this house. The world don't need to know our business. So when we go outside our door and we go to the world, we portray a whole different, leave it to beaver type of family, whatever. We're not who we really are. So it's like a facade. So that's kind of where that title got kind of stuck in my head with the mask that we kind of put on um, to show the world, the perfect picture, but that's not who we really are.
Right. It's like that. I think, I guess, with any situation, everyone thinks, oh, look at that family. They look great. They get along and are loving. But really, we always say, you don't know what happens behind closed doors.
That's
Er-
true. That's
Everybody's so
absolutely
busy
true.
trying to be the Joneses. I'm like, do you even know what the Joneses are doing?
You don't have no clue what the Joneses are going through.
Okay. All right. For our last reading of the book, could you read pages 164 to 168?
Okay. I don't know what chapter this is. I'll just start reading.
Okay.
By the summer of 1940, Fred and Lillian were married. Fred had taken a job as a stock clerk at Richmond Fruit Company on Carey Street. His new boss, Frank Burton, paid only a quarter more an hour than Mr. Stewart, but Fred needed to make more money to support his wife. She hadn't worked since leaving her job taking orders at Standard Drug, where they first met. Now she spent her days keeping the apartment clean, washing and ironing clothes, and at the end of the day, taking a long, relaxing bath in her claw footed tub. On Sundays, she attended the Church of Christ on North Street, just blocks away from their apartment. She had gotten Fred to attend church with her once, but he had little patience for how long the services lasted. One Sunday after church, Lillian entered the apartment with some exciting news. Hey, Fred, guess what? I don't know. What? Fred responded, sitting on the sofa, drinking a beer and listening to a baseball game on the radio. It's Sunday, for Christ's sake, Lillian scolded when she saw the beer can. Is that your big news? Fred replied sarcastically while turning the can to his lips. Lillian sucked in a breath and rolled her eyes. It's the Lord's Day, Fred. Can't you lay off the beer for one day? She disparaged. She removed her white gloves and white Kentucky Derby style hat. Anyway, my news is that the pastor and his wife asked me to babysit their two little boys twice a week while they do missionary work. What kind of missionary work are they doing? Fred asked, cutting his eyes and scowling at his wife. They mostly visit and minister to people in hospitals, nursing homes, and the elderly members of the church. They read scriptures, sing songs, pray with them, stuff like that. Pastor's wife says she sure does miss doing missionary work with her husband since having the boys. So they asked you to watch their boys. You, out of all the people in that church, over people they've known far longer than you, Fred asked. What are you trying to say? Lillian asked. She plopped down on the sofa next to her husband. I just think they're taking advantage of you because you're new there, Fred snapped, throwing his head back to down the last swig of beer. It's not like that, Fred. Besides, I'm not doing it for free. They offered to pay me $2, Lillian beamed. Fred didn't reply. He turned his attention back to the ball game on the radio. Lillian let out a heavy sigh, expressing her displeasure with Fred's dismissiveness of her. Well, I'll let you get back to your game, she said, tapping him on the thigh. She rose and went into the bedroom. Okay, then the scene changes. Lillian sat on the burgundy wing chair reading the book of Psalms in the pastor and his wife's living room. The couple had left just 30 minutes earlier, and the boys were already fast asleep in their bedroom. As she turned the page in the Bible, she was startled by a key turning in the door. When the door swung open, Lillian jumped to her feet, causing the Bible in her lap to fall to the floor. "Pastor, you scared me," Lillian said breathlessly. She could feel the pulse of her heartbeat pounding in the base of her neck. "Why are you back so soon?" she asked, her voice cracking. The pastor did not respond. He gently closed the door and moved towards Lillian. "Where's your wife?" she asked, craning her neck in an attempt to see behind him. He placed his finger to his lips in a gesture for her to stop speaking. "It's just the two of us," he whispered. "My wife is at the nursing home this evening. I told her I had to take care of some business at the church and would be back for her later." "So why are you here?" Lillian asked. The question was rhetorical. The look of lust in his eyes told her all she needed to know. She moved behind the wing chair. "Oh, come on, pretty lady," the pastor jeered. "You worldly women understand the needs of the flesh. This can be our secret. My wife and your husband don't have to know." Lillian stood rigid, holding on to the back of the chair. She cocked her head and narrowed her eyes. "What did he just call me?" She paused for a moment to gather her thoughts. She needed a moment to process what was happening. She had been deceived by a man of the cloth. Fred's insinuation about the reason she was picked to babysit came flooding back to her memory. "So they asked you to watch their boy. You, out of all the people in that church that have known them far longer than you," she remembered Fred saying this. Lillian felt like a fool. How could she be so gullible? Ambivalence settled in her spirit. She felt both sadness and anger at the same time. But soon anger won out. "Why, you dirty bastard," Lillian said, glaring up at the pastor with eyes red as fire. The pastor's eyes bucked in disbelief. "What did you say?" he asked, as if he was shocked by her reaction. "Don't you even think about putting your filthy hands on me," Lillian said in a low, gravelly voice. She moved slowly around the chair with her eyes still fixed on the pastor. He stood motionless, as if in a trance by her glare. His eyes followed her as she walked over to the sofa to retrieve her purse. Lillian backed her way to the door, never breaking eye contact with the pastor, who stood still as a statue. When she finally reached the door, she flung it open and ran out the house all the way home. Fred was reaching for a beer in the refrigerator when Lillian burst through the front door. "What the hell?" Fred asked. "You were right, Fred. That dirty dog made a pass at me," Lillian blurted out. "He left his wife at the nursing home and made up a lie about having to go back to the church for something. But instead, he came back to the house. I'm not going back to that church." "Damn right you're not going back," Fred said. Lillian ran into Fred's arms. They embraced. Fred had asked Fred had to ask the question that he dreaded, but needed to know. "Did he touch you?" Fred whispered. Lillian squeezed Fred around the waist. "No, I told that filthy bastard that he'd better not lay a finger on me." Fred gave Lillian a gentle kiss on her forehead. "Why don't you run yourself a bath? You'll feel better," he said. "Good idea." Lillian Lillian went into the bathroom and shut the door. When Fred heard the water in the tub running, he took his beer and plopped on the sofa. He was both angered and disenchanted by the hypocrisy of a trusted member of the society. You don't expect a so-called man of God to be a measure, and you certainly don't expect him to deny his own family, Fred thought, now remembering Reverend Frank. Fred and Lillian never spoke of the incident again, but afterwards, Fred was put off by all ministers. He figured that these men use the Bible and their robes to disguise that they are really wolves in sheep's clothing. Fred also began to come to realize that he didn't have what it took to be Lillian's hero. In a way, Fred too wore a disguise. the mask that portrayed him as Lillian's protector. But in reality, Fred knew that he didn't have the courage or the confidence to confront the pastor about the incident, which left him feeling emasculated. Lillian hadn't asked him to confront the minister, and secretly, Fred was relieved that she hadn't. He wondered if he wondered if on some level she knew that he was incapable of confrontation and that he really wasn't a superhero. Feeling inadequate after work the following night, instead of purchasing a six-pack of beer, Fred purchased a pint of gin.
Hey, thank you so much for reading those various chapters in this book. It's not the whole story, so I encourage all of you to try and get the book as well and read it for yourself. It's like I said in the beginning, it's kind of tough to read, especially with someone like Fred Smith, who used alcohol in such a way to really numb a lot of pain that he was going through. We're almost at the end here, and I want to thank you certainly for reading and participating in this. What do you want people to walk away with about this book?
I think that we have a lot in common. I think a lot of people can identify with these characters, various characters in this book in some way. You know somebody like this, or you have somebody like this in your family, and some of us may not be aware, like me, how you're actually affected. How, if I knew what I learned years ago, I would have made a lot of different choices. I'd have probably went to Trinity right out of high school. I mean, it was so many choices that I made that I regret, because I think I just lacked the confidence, the self-esteem. I could have just been a different person if I had known that these things were holding me back.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much for that. Liz has graciously offered to give away a copy of her book to tonight's attendees. So Liz, we have 12 people online. So pick a number between 1 and 12.
7.
7. All right, number 7, I think is Natasha Small. Lucky you.
Let's pick somebody else.
Oh, pick someone else? Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't want to bust Natasha out, but she was my writing coach.
Oh.
And she has a book.
Okay, I gotcha.
So let's go with number 10.
Number 10. Okay. All I've got on it is Benita's iPad.
Benita's iPad.
So I'm not really sure who that is, Benita. If you could let us know in the chat box, we can certainly, get you a copy of the book. We've got a couple of people that are writing in that the title is great and fits the chapters very well. Great book, Liz.
Thank you.
Others say, thank you. That was so good. Incredible writing, very powerful. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
Okay. But I certainly want to definitely thank you for taking time out. This has been a difficult time for you. I do want to let people know that you unfortunately have suffered another loss, the loss of your mother within the last week. So I have to admit, I'll tell everyone, I had asked Liz, do you really want to go forward with this? Because we can postpone. And she said, like, no, I'm holding it together. And I think once I get her buried, that'll be a different story.
A different story, yeah.
And I'm certainly, so happy that you decided to keep going with this. And again, deepest sympathies.
Thank you.
Great luck to you in the future. Do you have another book coming out?
I don't have anything on the horizon. Not right now.
Okay. Well, the book is in paperback form, and it's also available on Audible. So for those of you that are looking to do some traveling this summer, yay. You can certainly download it and play it while you're driving, doing some chores, or maybe just want to sit around and chill. I myself definitely enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was very good. The family story, it's a lot. It's really a lot. And certainly, but Fred, but in the end, Fred Smith left behind, you and your brothers, to carry on the family and go forward one step at a time
One step
and
at a time.
hopefully, heal from this. So with that, everyone, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Just a reminder that this has been recorded and you will receive the link for it along with the survey. It's very important that you fill out the surveys for us because we're asking you, what do you want to see for future programming? You want to see more people like Liz Hawkins or something different? We can certainly look to provide that for you. And with that said, thank you again, Liz.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you again for an inspirational story and
Everybody.
good luck in the future. And everyone, with that, I thank you all very well. And it looks like Bonita's iPad is actually Bonita Sutler,
All right.
class of 1998.
Right,
And with
Bonita.
that, we'll leave everyone with a great night and a good summer. And take care. Please be careful out there and enjoy yourselves. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.